Hello, everybody. Welcome to my Lisa Live. Today, I thought I would talk to you about how do you move forward after a relationship breakdown. So I'm going to encourage you to jump in on the conversation here. If you've had a particular experience, tools that you use to be able to get over your ex, be able to fall in love with yourself all over again, and be able to give yourself the opportunity to fall in love again. If that's happened to you, which who hasn't it happened to, I would love to hear from you in the comments. I would love to congratulate you, and I'd love to hear what actually worked for you so we can see if it can work for somebody else. And if you are in the throes of going through a relationship breakdown and you're one of the ones that really could use some help with this, then feel free to post your questions in here and I'll do my best to answer very specifically for you. So before we get started, I'm just going to introduce myself for a minute here. So my name is Lisa Sabaniak. I am a motivational speaker, a success coach, and the founder of lifelikeyomeanit.com and the host of the Facebook group, The Life You Deserve. How am I qualified to talk to you about anything along these lines today? Well, I am a survivor of 10 years of child abuse. From the age of 2 until 12, I endured psychological, physical, and sexual child abuse by my then stepfather. I then spent another decade of my life continually abusing myself. The psychological abuse that I went through involved him telling me that I was useless and worthless, stupid and ugly, telling me nobody was ever going to love me. And I believed him. You know, when you're just a little child, 10 years of hearing that, you tend to believe it, right? Not to mention that he was, somebody who was supposed to be taking care of me, believing in me, supporting me, right? That was supposed to be my hero, somebody I looked up to. So when he told me that I was useless, ugly, worthless, and useless, I believed it. So when we left him, when I was 12, I continued that mantra for at least another decade. Anything that I did, whether it was good or bad, I was able to put myself down, put myself back into my comfort zone, basically, a feeling that I was worthless, useless, ugly, and nobody was ever going to love me. It meant also that when my relationships broke down, well, then that meant that I could blame it on the fact that I was useless, right? I was ugly, I was worthless, and I was never going to be loved. And when a relationship was going great, then I would also start to have this nagging feeling in my head that I didn't deserve this because I was useless, ugly, worthless, etc. You get the gist here. So eventually, when I was in my 20s, I started to find my way back. I started to find my way to love myself, to trust myself, to have confidence in myself. I started to look at everything that I had survived, and I started to realize just how strong I was. And I also started to put everything else into perspective. I realized that if I did lose a relationship, that was nothing in comparison to what I had actually been through, right? That abuse that I had endured, and some of it you can read in my blogs where I have been quite open about the extent of the physical abuse in particular. But getting through abuse like that, it changes you. And when I realized that it had changed me for the better, it actually had made me a strong, independent woman. When I finally found how to love myself and respect myself, I really felt that, and I still do, that is because of my abuse, not despite it. And so I started to gain a new confidence. And being in a relationship, I started to realize that, of course, I was going to be hurt if I lost a relationship. But I was never, ever in my life going to be hurt the way that I was hurt for those 10 years and even the next 10 years afterwards by myself. If I could get through that, I could get through anything. And it started allowing me to have a lot more confidence in my relationships. It started to allow me eventually to go all in, right? To jump in feet first, to say, I'm not going to have my walls up. I'm not going to try to protect myself, because the very act of me trying to protect myself meant that I wasn't going to go all in. I wasn't going to be emotionally available. I was always going to be looking at that door and having one foot out, trying to protect myself. Ultimately was going to lead to my relationship's failure. And so I decided that I needed to actually go all in. And so I had been married and I was divorced for several months at this point, and I met somebody. And when I met him, I knew that this was going to be a really important person in my life. Let's call him Jimmy. Okay, that wasn't his name, but let's call him Jimmy. So I meet Jimmy and I decide I'm going to go all in. And it felt like he was going all in as well. We were in our 30s at this point. We both had open conversations about it, and we thought, we're grown-ups, we're real adults. We've had our pasts, and they've made us the people that we are today. And we're both strong enough that if this doesn't work out, at least we know that we gave it our all, and there'll be no what ifs afterwards. And so that's exactly what I did. I put everything on the table. For the first time, I allowed myself to feel, right? I had used detachment as my way of coping with my abuse. And so getting into this relationship and actually wearing my emotions on my sleeve was new for me, very, very new for me, right? Connecting my mind and my body again so that I would be allowed to feel those emotions in the first place was tremendous. And I started to notice that he would make little comments to me about how up and down my emotions could be. He suggested that I needed to go to therapy at some points. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but to me, it kind of felt like a little bit of a punch in the stomach, because I felt like this was my first time that I was actually opening up really, truly with another human being, and that their response was that I needed to seek help because it wasn't normal, quote unquote, for me to have highs and lows. And I thought, I'm pretty sure it is. I'm pretty sure it is normal for somebody to be happy in one moment and then in another moment to start to question whether or not they deserve that happiness. As long as I'm able to pull myself out of that, I don't really see why that would be a negative thing. So I carried on and I gave 100% into this relationship. And it was the best relationship of my life. We had the most amount of confidence, self-respect for one another. We never argued. We were always able to discuss our needs. It was the first time that if I felt that things weren't going all that great, for whatever reason, I could just sit down and let him know, and he didn't take it personally. He needed to fix it, but with me, not separate from me, right? We were in this together. I felt so loved and cherished and respected that it was the best relationship ever. Certainly the best one that I had ever been in. Until we had moved in together. We were about 3 years into our relationship. And on a whim, one of those laughing kind of moments when you say, oh my God, do you even want to be with me anymore? I'd done something foolish or whatever. And, you expect the other person to laugh and feel like, oh yeah. And he didn't. He looked at me straight in the eyes and said, I don't know. And my world fell apart. It just crumbled beneath my feet. I just didn't even realize that that was an option. I felt so secure and stable in that relationship that I had no idea that it could actually end. And he went on to tell me that he hadn't been happy recently. And I first started thinking, I can't believe that I didn't see this. How could I be in my own bubble so much that I didn't know that who I thought was the love of my life at that time was hurting? Oh, how selfish am I that I didn't realize that he was not actually happy. And we talked about it, obviously, endlessly. And he assured me, you know what, Lisa, we are in this together. I'm not going anywhere. I just want us to be able to make sure that, we're doing everything that we can to have a healthy relationship. And he went on to tell me that he felt like we were just roommates or brother and sister living together. So we started making some real serious changes. And I thought we were moving in the right direction. I would ask him from time to time, how do you think it's going? And he would say, I think it's going really well. And I thought, I've got two options here. I can choose to believe him, or I can choose to have this nagging doubt in the back of my mind. And I thought really long and hard about this. And I thought, if I have the nagging doubt, okay, it keeps me real. It makes me realize that this could end. It also means that it's going to throw a wall up. Right? Who's possibly going to be able to be open and loving and kind and everything that you want to be in a relationship when you are doubting what it is that your partner says to you? So I thought, if I throw the wall up, then this is going to end. And I am going to have that what if moment. I'm going to have lots of them. And I'm going to kick myself in the butt many, many times. So I'm going to trust him. I'm going to trust that he is telling me the truth. And I was in university at this time in my mid-30s and still working. So I was really pulled in a lot of different directions. And a few months later, he was at work that was out of province for me. I lived in Canada at the time, and he was not scheduled to be back for another few days. And I was finished my final exams. And so he flew back, and he said, I'm coming home right away. I want us to celebrate. I thought, oh, that's amazing. That's so great. And he walked in the door and he put his things down. He gave me this giant kiss. And so, I'm so hungry. I need a snack. So he got himself a snack, and we sat down together and we're shooting the breeze, talking about this and that. And he finished every last drop of that snack. And I thought, yeah, we're going to celebrate. And he turns to me and he says, I don't want to do this anymore. And I realized in that moment that for those last 4 months, he hadn't actually been trying to make this work. He was trying to wait it out until I was done my final exams. He was trying to make sure that he didn't bring emotional stress onto me while I was in university when he didn't need to. He had made a decision for himself and for me that it was better for him to just hold on, and that when I finished my course and had finished my final exams, that then he could let me know that he wasn't happy. And that meant to me that for the last 4 months we had been living a complete lie, right? And he went on to tell me that he hadn't been happy for about 2 years out of that now 3.5-year relationship. And I didn't even know what to say. I was in a different relationship. I was in a loving, supported, really respectful, amazing relationship. And he was there living with his sister. He was there not feeling the love at all. He was not happy. And I was grounded and centered and amazing. How is this possible? My world came apart like nothing I have ever known before. Far different from my abuse, far different from my marriage breaking down even. This just hit me like nothing else had. And a few weeks later, I had to pack up my things and leave his house and start this whole new life at about 38 years old, just completely dumbfounded. Questioning every single thing about myself. I questioned my intuition. I questioned how much of a bubble I was living in, that I didn't notice that he was hurting so much that we weren't even in the same relationship for 3/4 of the relationship, right? How is that even possible? It caused so much questioning of myself that I thought, I don't even know how I'm going to be able to put myself out there again. I can't trust myself. I found the best relationship I've ever been in. He didn't treat me poorly. He didn't cheat on me. He didn't, emotionally abuse me or physically abuse me or any other things that I had been through. He was the one. How could I not know he wasn't the one? How could I not know that every time he touched me, he felt like he was touching his sister or his best friend? How did I not pick up on that? How could I possibly trust myself to pick somebody else out to be my life partner and ever think that he felt the way that I thought he felt? How was I ever going to trust the words that he was saying to me? How was I ever going to trust my own feelings? How was I not going to put the wall up, right? Everything in my being, every single cell in my body wanted to throw every wall I have ever made up and then make it 2 feet taller, 6 feet thicker, right? I needed a huge wall to protect me from myself, it seemed. And I thought really long and hard on this, day after day, month after month. It took months to recover from this, right? And I decided every day that I needed to take one day at a time. I needed to honor the fact that I needed to grieve the loss of this. And I wasn't just grieving the loss of him. I was grieving the loss of a relationship I never had. right? I was grieving the loss of the relationship I thought I had, but was never actually there. And one of the ways that I needed to grieve that was to allow myself to realize that those feelings of love and security and contentment and everything that being in that relationship made me feel was real. It wasn't real for him. He might not have felt it, but it was real for me. And learning that it wasn't the same for him should not make it not real for me. I felt those things. And it was all right for me to feel those things. I needed to feel those things. They were pinnacle in my recovery of my child abuse, like nothing else has been. Being in a stable, secure, emotionally and physically relationship is really my turning point. And so the fact that it wasn't, what you would call real because he wasn't feeling exactly the same way should never underpin the way that I actually felt. And so then that meant I needed to grieve two things. I needed to grieve what I really felt was true at the time. And then I needed to grieve the fact that it never actually was true. And I allowed myself to do that. I allowed myself to feel the pain because you know what? For so many years, detachment or disassociation was my way of dealing with my abuse. And when that happens, you don't just detach from the situation, you detach from yourself. Your mind and your body become two separate things. The things that happen to you happen to your body, not your mind. And that is a great coping mechanism, but it is not a great long-term strategy, right? Because then you prevent yourself from feeling and from being and truly experiencing your own existence, your own life. And that is never going to get you the happiness that you want and the happiness that you deserve. Right? So I had spent so long detaching and then so long trying to reattach that I sure as hell was not going to let myself do that to myself all over again. So I let myself feel every single emotion. When I was in a lecture at uni, because that was only 2 years into a 4-year program, when I was in a lecture and I needed to bawl my eyes out, I did. I don't care about anybody else that was around me. That's what I was feeling in that moment. When I needed to cancel out from going out with friends because I needed time for me, I let myself do that. And when it was time, eventually, several months later, for me to start putting the feelers out for whether or not I would be strong enough to actually date, I had a conversation with myself, a really serious conversation where I said, Lisa, this is make or break time. You've got a tremendous decision here. You can go back to what you always have done before. You can go back and you can put the walls up. You can go back and make sure that you are not going to get hurt. Or you can sit there and say, if I don't take the chance, I am going to get hurt. I am going to sabotage my own relationship by not going all in. If I put even one little stake in the ground for that wall, I am going to be the driving force that's going to cause that relationship to fail. 100%, no doubt. So if you want to continue this cycle, then that is what you're going to do. If you don't want to continue this cycle, then you have that power and you're the only one that does. It doesn't matter who you pick. You can pick the best man in the entire universe. But if you are not ready to not drive that stake into the ground and start putting that wall up, you are going to ruin it and you are going to end up in that cycle. So what I needed to do to make sure that I didn't do that is I needed to go back to my abuse. I needed to go back to realize and remind myself that that is, as difficult as this relationship breakdown was, my abuse was most certainly the worst thing I have ever and will ever experience. And I got through it. I found a way to find my strength, to respect myself, love myself, find my value, and find my worth. And I'll be damned if I am going to let anybody else take that away from me, including me. So I needed to remind myself that a relationship is not going to be the thing that tears me apart. I might feel the grief. I might feel the pain. I might feel solemn and everything else that comes along with a relationship breakdown. But I am going to survive it because I have survived so much worse before. So then became this whole realization, right? Over here, if I put up the wall, I am most certainly going to lose that relationship, and I'm going to be the cause of that destruction. And I am going to end up feeling that pain, that sorrow, the solemnness that comes with knowing that that relationship is over. I'm going to have to go through the grieving cycle again. If I don't do that, and over here on this side, if I go all in and I trust myself, if I trust that I will be okay no matter what, then I will go all in and there will be no what ifs. If it fails again, I will be okay because I will allow myself to grieve. I will allow myself that time, and I will eventually pick myself up. I will eventually be able to look back and see what my part was, and I will be able to eventually make the necessary changes that I feel I need to make. And then I will be able to go on and be a stronger person because I have done that in every other part of my life, including relationship breakdown. I can do it again. So when I decided that I had that confidence and it was time for me to meet somebody, I did one more really crucial thing. I made a list. I made a list of all the things that I deserve in a partner. They were not superficial things, right? I did not need to write down that I want somebody tall, dark, and handsome and all of that. I needed to write a list of all the things that I deserve. I deserve a man, not a boy. I deserve a man who can tell me how he feels. I deserve a man that has enough strength and enough confidence in himself and in me that if he's not happy, he can tell me as soon as he realizes it, not drag it out for 2.5 years. I deserve to have a man who truly is willing to work on it with me. And if he's not, recognizes that and finds the door. I deserve a man that has passion in his life, compassion in his life, is empathetic, and is not just going to look at himself and what's best for him, but what is best for us. And he's going to find out what's best for us by talking to me and find out what is best on my end of things as well. I deserve a man who has goals, right? And who is going to let me in on those goals. I deserve a man who wants to know what my goals are and wants to be part of me reaching them and will celebrate every step along the way. I deserve a partner. And any other thing that I can think of along the way, I deserve that too. So that means I deserve somebody who is flexible, just like I need to be flexible, right? And I literally wrote every single one of those things down. That is what I deserved, and I was not going to accept anything less. And when the time was right, when I was emotionally ready, when I was physically ready, right, I found him. I found him in my now husband, right? And it is possible to find love again, but you need to give yourself a break. You need to let yourself grieve, right? You need to not beat up on yourself, but just to allow yourself to be. You need to then, when you are ready, find your strength. Okay? I don't care how badly that person treated you. I don't care what part of the relationship breakdown was your fault. This is a two-way street here. It is never just one person's fault. There's always two people in this party, right? Finding your part in it is empowering, because then you can sit and actually make decisions on how you want to change. And that is amazing. That brings so much power and strength back to you. So instead of looking at it as something that's negative, something that you don't like about yourself, you find a way to turn that weakness into your strength, right? By finding love for yourself, finding respect for yourself, really truly deciding that you are worth more than what that person was able and ready and willing to give you. I hope that makes sense. So if you are listening to this, even if it is afterwards, that is no problem. I would love to hear your comments on this because everybody knows what I'm talking about, right? And even if you are watching this and you are so young that you haven't had a lot of relationship experience yet, then maybe you know what I'm talking about with a friendship breakdown, right? Which can be just as devastating, right? Finding our value and finding our worth means that we attract people in our lives that also know your value and your worth, that we are never, ever going to settle for anything less. When you really and truly believe that, you recognize people that are not valuing you and not believing in your own worth, and they're just not appealing. You just don't want them around. I hope that that makes sense. And I hope that that helped give some of you that might be right in the throes of this grief permission to allow yourself to grieve for however long you need to. Sometimes our greatest friends that are around, they forget what it was like to go through this. And at a certain point, they just kind of expect you to get over it, right? And I'm telling you, you take as long as you bloody well need, because you deserve that. If it needs 2 months, 6 months, a year, you deserve to take that time for yourself, as long as you are spending that time finding your strength instead of forcing yourself down into that wallow of grief, right? That wallow of despair, of constantly blaming yourself. If that's what's happening, then yes, you need a lifeline to pull yourself out. But if you are just allowing yourself to feel, to be human, and in that finding your strength, then you go, girl. You take as long as you need to do that. All right, it's been a pleasure. I hope that you got as much out of that as I do. I tell you, there is such power in sharing your stories. So I'm posting this on my group, The Life You Deserve. For any of my group members, please use this as a forum to go live. You are welcome at any time and just get stuff off your chest. It is so amazing and freeing. And it helps people to relate to you as well. And sometimes it's a lot easier than just trying to write out your whole story. So feel free and do the same as well. I will talk to you soon. Bless.